In early February, the troops of the 4th Ukrainian Front launched a decisive offensive. We, stormtroopers, had more work. Our section was in the bend of the Dnieper. We processed the enemy positions, controlled his communications. On one of such days, I received an unusual assignment. Though it was a frosty morning. But after 1.5 kilometers of crossing in fur overalls and in unties, it was hot. At the headquarters dugout, I decided to take a break. I took out a cigarette, took a drag once, another. Suddenly, I hear the voice of my dispatcher. "Hello, Tolia. The commander is calling you. Urgent." The commander already had a deputy commander, chief of staff, and the commander of our squadron. "Sit down, Comrade Ned Balo." Major Lykovsky invited me with a gesture. He looked worried and anxious. "Here's the deal," he said, spreading the operational map on the table. Pencil, which Lykovsky used instead of a pointer, aimed at the area of our actions near Nikopol. It is necessary to go without cover a couple of pair on Zelenaya of Turaya and Vasilievka to establish the true position of the parties. I entrust this task to you. Pay attention to the location of enemy tanks. Take into account that our units went on the offensive at dawn. And everything you see on the battlefield, you'll report to General Kryukin's command post. Report everything down to the last detail. Is that clear? Yes, sir. That's good. Go get ready for the flight. We left the commander's office alone with Krivoshlik. Who's coming with me? I asked the commander. Otin. I was surprised. Oktin was to perform only the 3rd combat flight, and the task is difficult. But an order is an order. Soon Junior Lieutenant Oktin was with me. I explained to him the details of the combat task, its features, reminded him what maneuvers we'll need to perform. "Do not worry, Comrade Commander. I will not let you down," answered Otin. On the plains. I commanded. "Departure on your readiness." Maliuk was already in his cockpit. The mechanic reported on the readiness of the attack aircraft to take off. I quickly put on the armor pilot and took a seat in the plane. Oktin's car opposite, about 30 meters away. I can see how under the right wing of the attack aircraft still fussing aviation experts. Even the senior engineer is there, recognized Klubov from afar. I call Motovilov. Run, find out what's going on there. Pilots know well how languid it is to sit in the cockpit and wait for the malfunction to be eliminated. Motovilov came back. The right gun is malfunctioning. Here we go, I thought with annoyance. And to pass the time, switched the spew to the air gunner. How are you doing, namesake? Everything's fine, Commander. I'm ready, answered Maliuk cheerfully. I looked at my watch more and more often. I was getting nervous. I started the engine, warmed it up. And the second airplane still continues some kind of fuss. Should I not go alone? Suddenly arose a desire. General waiting for intelligence, and here wasting time. So I decided to take off. I was going in a circle over the airfield. I saw a humpback taking off. After waiting for it to retract its landing gear, I pressed the transmitter button. Otin, are you there? The wingman has no transmitter. All commands go to him, and Oktin has to answer me with a sign. Him. He's rocking the plane from wing to wing. Get in position. I order him and take the course. Above us, solid clouds. The flight altitude is 400 meters. Visibility is getting worse by the minute. The cloud presses us to the ground. I am worried, will the young pilot be able to cope? Down at the front edge, we had to drop to 50 meters. Just crossed the front line, anti-aircraft guns started talking. I was looking at the ground, reading the terrain. I even thought I could hear the rolling hurrah of the infantry attacking. Camouflaged boxes appeared ahead. I counted 7 of them, 7 Tigers. At the muzzle of the guns, flames. They're firing, I noted to myself. I looked back, the infantry is lying down. What if we help them? Diamond, I'm Caution 03. I'm contacting General Kryukin's command center. I'm in the target area. I see infantry advancing. Enemy tanks are obstructing its advance. Permission to strike. Caution 03. Permission granted. Octane is coming from the right. I'll pass it to him. Attack the tanks with P-tabs. I'll choose the targets, the ones closer to ours. And, turning the airplane abruptly, I'm going to attack. Octane is coming alongside. Let's go into the attack, turning on the afterburner. The engines are roaring furiously. Our rapid flight on a shoal, a powerful rumble and a blow to the Tigers, according to my plan, should raise the spirit of our soldiers advancing in this area. I jumped out on the hill and commanded. Octane, yours is the last, mine is the second. Let's throw bombs. A sharp turn to the left. I see 2 tanks on fire below. Malyuk takes the opportunity and from the turret machine gun pour fire enemy trenches. Otin. Another run attack with ERS and cannons. We set fire to another tank. We're in again. Process the enemy positions with all the firepower, which has a stormtrooper. I carefully observe what is happening on the ground and report to the CP. After the 6th approach, when the ammunition was used up, I decided to go home. But I was dissatisfied. I would like to make a couple more runs to support our infantry. I came out of the attack with a combat turn, requesting permission to return home, and then suddenly it was as if I was in milk. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't even determine the position of the plane the machine dived into the clouds. I took the plane out of the grey shroud. Here is the ground again visible. Octane aside. 300 meters separates us. Octane, can you see me? The airplane swung from wing to wing. He sees me. Get in position, we're going home. Well done. I think. Octane passed the exam. He didn't fail. And then ahead, almost in the hood, I noticed the silhouette of an airplane, which suddenly emerged from the clouds towards us. Here are already visible crosses Junkers, 88. Obviously a scout. I won't let him get away. I press one throttle, another. The weapon is silent. There's no limit to my frustration what to do. And Junkers evades the attack, hurries to hide in the saving cloud. He'll get away, he'll get away. We must stop his way. I turn on the afterburner. The engine doesn't hum, it roars. It's like I've merged with the car. All my muscles are tense to the limit. One thought, one desire is guiding me now to catch up with the enemy and destroy him. The distance is closing. The only way out is to go for a ram. I decide to approach from behind and propeller cut off the Junker's tail feathers. Commander, watch out. Octane on the left, shouts Malyuk over the spew. At the same moment, from above, from behind the clouds, a dark hulk comes at me. The impact shakes the machine. The left wing of my attack aircraft shrunk into an accordion. Pulled the wheel on himself, the plane inertia went up, but having lost speed began to fall, and no effort I could not now subordinate it to his will. In a few moments, as if on a screen, my whole life flashed before my eyes. I saw myself in childhood, in the pants just bought by my mother, in my youth, when the secretary of the district committee handed me a Komsomol ticket. The first air battle, Igor Kalitin, Katyusha anxious and confused. And the plane is falling, measuring the last meters to the ground. A blow. The details became known to me later. Malyuk and I were saved by pure chance. If the attack plane had gone down steeply, we wouldn't have survived. But he fell on the right wing, which softened the blow. Malyuk was thrown out of the cockpit 50 meters. Anton, fortunately, fell on a parachute. That's what saved him. After lying unconscious for a few minutes, he opened his eyes. Above him stood 2 soldiers. Are you alive? There was no answer. Malyuk lifted himself up, looked around confused. A dull pain gripped his body. Where am I? With your own, brother, with your own. And where's my commander? What commander? The pilot. There's no one else. One plane crashed over there, the soldier pointed his hand towards the forest edge, and fell to pieces, and the second one is burning. That can't be. Jumped up Maliuk and, falling down on his foot, rushed to the burning car, but it was impossible to approach the airplane. Maliuk looked at the license plate 34. That's O'Kane's car. And where is he himself? Where is the gunner? The answer was only hot flames. Maliuk realized that here he was powerless to do anything to help his comrades. But where is his car? Where is the storm trooper on which was displayed the number 32? And Maliuk hurried to the place where, as the soldier told him, lying only wreckage. There they are. By some miracle the cabin survived. I looked and measured myself, leaning my head on the steering wheel. I was lying in the cabin. Unmoving. Bloody. The soldiers who came up helped Maliuk to pull me out from under the wreckage. WE fell about 10 o'clock in the morning. I didn't wake up until evening. I opened one eye and the other one was bandaged. I don't know where I am. The low ceiling of a peasant's hut. Silence. A girl in a white kerchief bent over me. Next to her, a soldier in an overcoat. I forgot myself again. After a while I see someone in a green jacket standing over me. It's dusk, a short day in February. The face seems familiar. I try to remember something. It's Maliuk. I looked around the room. 2 women standing in the corner, children huddled together. Where are we? I can barely squeeze it out of me. I can't talk, it hurts to breathe. And Zelenaya of Toraya. What, the Germans? No, ours. Who said that? A foreign voice, unfamiliar. Who is that man in the leather raglan? Maliuk reassures me it's our Soviet pilot. He was shot down last night. He parachuted out. The wind blew him away and he landed on the edge of a village with the poetic name Zelina Vitoraya. It was liberated by our troops only a few minutes ago. I'm relieved. But I couldn't breathe at all. The stove was hot in the room. Anton, help me up. I call Maliuk. Take me to the air. Maliuk bends over, puts his neck and I put my healthy arm around it. We're out. Maliuk helped me to settle down on the stoop and sat next to me. I was completely upset. My head was covered with bandages. My left arm was tied up. My whole body ached. Wagons are passing by us. The horses are getting stuck. The snow has melted and the clay soil has completely loosened. No car will not get here. No airplane will land nearby. What are we going to do? Let's go, Anton. No one can help us here. I remember from the map 6 kilometers from Zelenaya of Toraya is the commander's command post. Let's go. And we went on our way. Those 6 difficult kilometers, Maliuk literally dragged me on his back. Finally the road led us to a village. Somewhere here is the control center of General Kryukin. I had no more strength to walk. I sat down on a log. Go on your own, Anton. Look for antennas. When you see them, it's a sign, the CP. I don't remember how much time passed. I woke up from the voices, from the murmur of the engine. Maliuk came running up. Everything's in order, Commander. Let's go to our own. Anton and the driver helped me to climb on the platform of the rover, and we went to the infirmary. There they took off the bandage, washed my wounded face with alcohol, bandaged my wounds again, gave me injections, tied up my damaged arm and took me to the village on the same all-terrain vehicle. It was already dark. On a flat field, there was a PO-2 airplane on which General Kryukin ordered to send us urgently to the hospital. I was seated in the rear cabin. Maliuk sat next to me. The engine rumbled. The airplane ran fast but suddenly slowed down, turned around and again went for takeoff. No, nothing worked. The machine could not get off the ground. Stop, shouted Maliuk to the pilot. He reduced the revolutions. Anton jumped down and, signalling the pilot, began to lift the tail of the Kuznik. The engine roared again. Pushing the car as hard as he could, Maliuk ran until he fell. This time the PO-2 soared up and took a course to Melitopol. We saw Anton the next morning. He was delivered to the hospital by the same PO-2. Doctors carefully examined him. and was surprised the air gunner was actually healthy. My back hurts a little, my muscles also hurt, but not very much, confusedly admitted Maliuk. I am on the operating table. Next to me, all in white, sits a tired woman. She looks at me for a long time, smiling affectionately, then, carefully taking my hand, checks my pulse. Did you bring the anesthesia? She asks someone. Not yet. The woman sighs, looks into my eyes again. How are you feeling, young man? Can you stand the operation? I nodded my head. This gesture meant do whatever you want with me, but hurry up. And began a difficult and painful struggle for life. We operated without anesthesia. Gritting my teeth, I patiently endured all the agony. From the pain I lost consciousness several times, and yet I endured. But that was only the first operation. After it another and another. I was repaired stitched wounds, spliced bones. And now, accompanied by a surgeon, Maliuk, and Regimental Dr. Dmitriev entered the ward. I told you, Commander, that you would live. Shon Maliuk. His joy was unbounded. Get well soon. The regiment is looking up to you. You should finish off the enemy, clear Crimea from him. I tried to smile, but could not. Almost all my face was bandaged. It was nice to hear that they were waiting for me in the regiment, that people still needed me. And they asked me to give you a letter? Dmitriev smiled. Shall I read it? I blinked my eyes and pointed at Maliuk. Anton took the letter, sat closer, unfolded the sheet, and began to read quietly. Tolyusha, my dear. Whatever happens, know that I will always be with you. I love you. Kisses. Katya. Though I was now looking at the world with one eye, it did not escape me that the woman surgeon, who seemed to be watching with indifference, turned her back to the wall and took a handkerchief out of her pocket. It's no use her crying. I will now definitely recover. I felt as if my strength had been restored. I seemed to be infused with the elixir of life. I could not, had no right to die now. My regimental friends were waiting for me. Katyusha was waiting for me. Time passed, and my wounds gradually healed. My bones healed. Dressings were no longer so painful. Skillful hands of medics did everything possible, and even impossible, to put me back on my feet as soon as possible, and thus to return to the battle formation. One thing that bothered me was the purplish red scars on my face. I looked in the mirror and recoiled, am I or am I not? My forehead, nose, chin in scars. Only my eyes. And the rest of it was alien. How would the one who said she loved and waited for me feel about this other, disfigured man? ... What an immense happiness it is to be at my airfield again. I again felt in myself the power that carries a soldier into battle, and was ready now, this very minute, to sit at the wheel of a winged machine and fight even harder, to beat the enemy even harder. Some people say that after difficult combat situations fear appears, but I have some indomitable thirst to fly. However, in the depths of my soul lurked something similar to fear. But it was a very different feeling. I was in a hurry. I wanted to see Katusha as soon as possible, and at the same time I was afraid of this meeting. ... The first person who met me on the way was my dear friend and comrade in arms, Anton Maliuk. We hugged and kissed. He had been waiting for me since morning. How did you know that I had to come? I didn't inform anyone about it. I know everything, Anton Shon. I have a special instinct. We were surrounded by comrades. They shook my hand, congratulated me on my recovery, told me the most important news. There was a lot of them. There were some good ones, some not so good. The fact that the regiment was striking at the enemy groups, rolling back deep into the Crimea, this, of course, was good news. But to hear that such fine pilots as Tolmachov, Sashivko, Igorishev were killed was painful and hard. The regiment commander was promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel, reported one. Newcomers arrived, all in the 3rd Squadron identified, added another. Maybe you know these names: Karpiv, Obozny, Maslentsev, Kiriev, Kozhushkin. No, I didn't know these guys, but I had a long way to go with them at the front. Didn't they tell you about Berezhnev yet? Listen. And my comrades told me about the exploits of Junior Lieutenant Anatoly Berezhnev. The second squadron, headed by Senior Lieutenant Leonid Beda, stormed an enemy airfield. The commander's airplane was damaged by a direct hit of an anti-aircraft shell, and Leonid Beda was forced to land on the territory occupied by the enemy. The group was headed by Beda's deputy, Lieutenant Brandes, who reorganized the squadron and radioed an order to Bereznev to land and take the commander and his air gunner Semyon Romanov on board. Easy to say to take on board. From above, Bereznev could see well how Hitlerites were running from everywhere to the attack aircraft. He passed almost over the heads of the Nazis, fired on them, and sat down next to the commander's car. The commander set it on fire so that the enemy would not get it, quickly jumped on the wing of Bereznevsky airplane and squeezed into the cockpit of the air gunner. Shooter Romanov settled in the gondola landing gear. And at this time, 4 stormtroopers led by Brandes literally poured Hitlerites fire. Bereznev gave the gas, the engine roared, and with 4 brave aviators on board the attack aircraft flew over the heads of the Nazis and returned to his airfield. What good guys! I sincerely admired Bereznev and other comrades in arms, for whom courage, bravery, heroism became a familiar, everyday thing. "Comrade Commander, you are called," whispered Maliuk. "Sorry, friends the bosses need to report," I said. The guys parted, and we went on with Maliuk. "Who calls the regiment commander?" I asked Anton. Maliuk smiled enigmatically. Oh, that cunning Maliuk. I guessed and immediately felt fear of meeting Katusha. She saw me from a distance. Her blonde curls flashed quickly through the window. And now Katya flew off the porch like a bird, rushing towards me. I stopped a few steps away from her. I stopped because at such a distance the bloody marks on my face should not be visible. "Hello, Katusha." I feel that I say these words in a deaf, alien voice. Am I this or am I not? My heart is pounding. And she has already wrapped her arms around my neck and put her lips to my scars. Her blonde curls tickle my nose, and I start to smile. I see my wet eyelids, I see a large tear on Katusha's cheek, and I laugh. "Thank you, my dear, for your letter. It accelerated my recovery. It helped me to survive." Katya blushed. "Really?" "Yes." I looked into her eyes and could not look at her I had once looked so dreamily, and for a long time into the bottomless depths of the sky, surrendering to dreams of the future. Now he was making fate again. "Thank you for the present." Katya suddenly realized. What gift? I didn't understand. Well, the one you and Maliuk sent. I only had to say you're welcome. And here Maliuk distinguished himself. The thing is that he once heard me asking our intendant to buy a set of mullein threads for any price. Maliuk guessed who they were for. And so, on his way back from the hospital, and wishing to comfort Katusha in some way, he looked in at the intendant, took the purchase from him and handed it to the girl, saying that I was sending the gift. And again I felt how much tact, how much nobility there was in Maliuk's generous soul. "And I've prepared a present for you too," Katusha went on. "Come to our place, you'll see." We went into the dormitory. The girlfriends immediately found urgent business, Maliuk disappeared, and we were left alone. Katya took an elaborately embroidered small cushion and handed it to me. "This is for you. I embroidered it with your threads, to rest well." "Thank you, my dear. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." My appearance in the regiment was a pleasant surprise for the commander. Having met, we talked until late at night. There seemed to be no end to our talks. Krivoshlik was interested in the details of my last combat flight, asked how I was treated in the hospital, how I felt now. In turn, I was interested in the affairs of the squadron, what types of combat applications are most used now, how young pilots enter the ranks, whether all the aircraft are in good condition, how the technical staff works. Krivoshlik also told me about regimental news. We talked about many things. One thing only saved for tomorrow. I felt that the commander, no matter how kind and responsive he was, this issue will be solved without discounting the friendly relations. In the morning I went to the squadron commander and asked to give me control flights, to include me in the combat calculation. Major Krivoshlik stared at me and was silent. A long silence. But then he stood up, smiled his kind smile, came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder. "How can you, Anatoly? Your arm is still in plaster. You'll get better. You'll get everything you need: control flights, and the right to fly combat missions." Of course, the commander was right. But I couldn't wait. My heart was hungry for combat flights. I wanted to fight. For 3 days I've been walking around the airfield, searched all the nooks and crannies. My comrades in arms are flying out on assault missions, and I see my friends off and meet them. Nervous as never before. No, I can't stay idle any longer, I finally decided. And went to the regiment commander. Ned Balo. Lyakhovsky greeted me affably. "Comrade Guards, Lieutenant Colonel." I addressed him with annoyance and hope. "Everyone is flying, beating the enemy, and I have to sit idle." "I appreciate the impulse, but your arm is still not in order." I prepared myself in advance for such a turn, and before going to the commander's office, pushed the plaster tube further into the sleeve. Now, stretching out his left arm, began to demonstrate to Lyakhovsky how well works brush. "Well, if so, that's another matter," agreed Lyakhovsky. "Find Filimonov and fly with him." Yes, I stretched out and clicked my heels. At that moment I wanted to kiss the commander, but unfortunately the charter does not provide for such tenderness. The control flights passed without any remarks. The deputy commander of the regiment, Major Filimonov, who took me out, was satisfied with the piloting technique and gave the go-ahead for an independent flight. Everything was going well. I should be happy. But I felt dissatisfied with myself. After the break I felt stiff. I didn't have the same confidence. The car wasn't completely under my control. What is it? Lost skills, delayed reaction. I was worried, but at the same time clearly understood the effect of a break in flying. It is necessary to fly on a combat mission once or twice, and everything will fall into place. But now the training flights were over, and I was back in combat formation. I'm sitting in the cockpit, waiting for the takeoff signal. To the right, to the left, murmuring airplanes, at the helm of which sit my glorious comrades. The feeling of joy overflows me. I want to share it with someone. And over the intercom I shout to Anton Maliuk, my namesake, "And it's great that you and I will fly together again in the battle." Maliuk answers, "Now we'll show the Kroats what a pound of fox is worth." The battle situation is heating up every day. The Soviet troops are tasked to defeat the Crimean grouping of the enemy. The fascists have pulled to the area of Sevastopol all the aviation and anti-aircraft artillery operating in the Crimea to reliably cover the departure of ships, taking equipment, looted property, food. Hitler's command was least of all concerned about its people. Fooled by Goebbels' propaganda, believing in the delusional ideas of the Führer, German soldiers died by the thousands far from Germany, in a foreign land. Many German soldiers began to realize that they were doomed, that there is a formidable fire shaft bringing vengeance to fascism, that this shaft will not stop here, by the sea, or in the fields of satellites, that it will reach all the way to the Vaterland. The hour of reckoning had come, and it was necessary to answer for what had been done. In order to raise the morale of the flying staff, the enemy command issued a special order, according to which the pilot who shot down 2 Soviet Ilus during the day had the right to immediately leave the Crimea. In addition, for each shot-down attack aircraft was paid a reward in double figures. The city of immortal Russian glory called us to the feet, to retribution to the hated enemy. It is good that our 75th Guards Regiment operates on this section of the front. It seems to me that it is here that you can really test yourself. The regiment supports our ground troops and strikes at enemy facilities, in particular at the Nazi airfield on Cape Chersonese. In addition, we were given the task to sink Nazi ships in Sevastopol bays. But the closer we come to Sevastopol, the more difficult it is for us to act. The fights are getting fiercer, the battles are more and more persistent. We'll go, sometimes 6 on a mission, and return 1 or 2 airplanes. Sometimes it happened that the whole 6 died. Not without reason, the veterans of the regiment said that Sevastopol was the second Stalingrad in terms of combat intensity. In one of such hot days here, on the Crimean land, a great memorable event happened in my life. I was accepted into the party. At the field airfield, before the next combat flight, the head of the political department of the division handed me and Nikolay Semeyko party tickets, congratulated us, and wished us new victories. I flew to the mission and thought about how high my responsibility to the people, to the party, to its eternally living leader Lenin. It was as if I was again swearing allegiance to the motherland. Early in the morning we flew out 6 to storm the enemy's front line. The group was led by Major Krivoshlik. It was very close to the target. It took 2 minutes to fly. One of the accompanying fighters transmits a warning on the radio. Cautions, careful in the air, the enemy. I can already see about 24 Junkers are coming towards us. On each of us 3. Messers do not take into account they have already tied up in battle Red Star Yak. The distance is rapidly shrinking. I took a closer look at the sight. The size of the enemy machines in the optical device every second is increasing. The impression is as if the Junkers swell. I chose one. I'm getting closer. It's time. I pressed the throttles. Traces hit the target and Junkers smoked, began to fall. Major Krivoshlik also fires, and another Lopotnik is enveloped in flames. I am seized by the excitement of battle. I dive and approach the enemy at a distance of fire. Lopotnik fights back as hard as it can with its onboard weapons. My mind flashes down below is the oil radiator. And if the bullet hits the center plane? There are bombs in the compartments. In such a whirlwind, every moment is evaluated by the highest score. After all, behind it a whole life. The thumb of my right hand reached for the button with 2 letters RS carved on it, and my left hand was about to press the cannon and machine guns. Junkers in the scope. I aligned the crosshairs, take the preposition. That's it. Now fire. Bright flashes, and another enemy plane falls. WE reliably supported the advancing troops. We disabled 3 self-propelled guns, destroyed 2 mortar positions, shot down 4 Lopotniks. The enemy did not lose about 60 of his soldiers. Under the cover of 4 Yaks we return home. Our bodyguards also shot down 2 FV-190s. Returning, I imagine our airfield. This is how communists should fight, the deputy commander or party secretary will say when we land. He'll come up and shake hands with everyone. Me too, because this flight is special for me, the first one in which I participate as a member of the Great Lenin Party. I was not mistaken having driven into the parking lot. I saw both an deputy politician and the secretary of the party organization. Putting before us the next task, Lieutenant Colonel Lyakhovsky emphasized that it is extremely important and a lot depends on its successful completion. I unfolded the flight map and found the points where the targets were, made marks. It was necessary to destroy artillery batteries of the enemy in the area of State Farm, 10 and Sapun Mountain by 6 Elov. It was necessary to strike at the moment when our tanks and infantry would go on the offensive. The batteries must be suppressed at all costs. You can select the best pilots of the regiment to your group, suggested Lyakhovsky. No, it would be better if the guys from our squadron went. I knew everyone perfectly well. I knew who was capable of what. I had no reason not to trust my Falcons. And flying together meant a lot during the battle. The only thing I asked the commander was to allow me to take off 8 minutes earlier. I told him my plan. Lyakhovsky did not object. In preparation for this combat flight, I was born 2 variants of assault attacks, but experience suggested that in reality everything will be different. Very complex equation in this task. And only there, above the battlefield, just before the attack, can appear quite unexpected variant, the most optimal, the most correct. Much depended not so much on the pilots as on me as a leader. The pilots trusted me, they expected from me competent and decisive actions. So, 8 minutes to spare. In the target area I turn the group to the left. With us comes the attached and I would say loyal 4 Yaks. I make one circle, then at an altitude of 950 meters the second. I carefully study the battle area. Anti-aircraft shells are bursting in the sky. Here and there are airplanes, their own and enemy, attack each other, exchange fire traces. Here in the distance falls one, in the distance pulled the smoke tail of another. The Soviet troops preparing for the attack see us, know that we are about to begin to act, clearing the way for infantry and tanks. I'm still weighing the pros and cons, and in the sky there's a roundabout, smoke, fire. All in smoke war in the Crimea, but here the hands of the clock show our time. The plan of attack is already ripe, and I command on the radio. Cautions, follow me, and, sharply descending, reorganize the group in the right bearing for attacks from the circle. We have to hit from a strafing run. Squeezing out of the attack aircraft all that the technique is capable of, we rush into the attack. I remind you, bombs must be thrown no lower than 50 meters. Seconds later, fountains of earth exploded at the positions of enemy batteries. You know our men. I shout into the air. The enemy is still inactive. Anti-aircraft guns are not firing, so the enemy has not had time to prepare, confused. We're making a second run, a third. I look around the combat circle, all wingmen are intact. Fourth run, fifth, 30 attacks. On the last approach, I photographed the work of the attackers. I feel that our strike was sudden and overwhelming for the enemy. Cautions. It's over. Let's go home. Thank you, little ones. I turn to the cover fighters, gathering the group. From above, I can see the infantry attacking. The bluish-blue clouds of explosions stand in its way, but nothing can stop the attackers. Ahead are assault groups of ground troops, tasked to block and destroy enemy pillboxes and bunkers. We support them from the air, and for good reason. Here is a particularly strong node of enemy defences. Sapun Hill is surrounded by several tiers of trenches, covered by minefields and a frequent wire fence. Marines went on the offensive. Tanks moved in. Success to you, my fighting friends. I'm happy the mission is accomplished. Everyone is safe and sound. I switched to Maliuk. How's your mood? Normal, comrade commander. We've peppered the fascists. Shall we sing? We can, replied Maliuk. Which one? The one about Katyusha. Maliuk guessed. Joyful and happy, we sang. The group came to the airfield on a strafing run, on a right bearing. I found the wingmen to land. This is how we traditionally thank the technical staff for their diligent preparation of the machines, and report on the successful completion of the combat mission. After landing, pilots and gunners reported what they saw. I am satisfied there is not a single scratch on the ILS. Now I am not ashamed to report to the regiment commander. I'm going, and Nikolai Tarakanov meets me. You're a lucky man, Anatoly. And who are you like? In you. All in you, Nikolai. I've been in similar bindings in the Stalingrad area, but then we went in pairs, and you've led so many, and everything's all right. Everyone's safe and sound. That's great. And your Klubov can't get enough of his son. Even when he fell, he said he managed to stay alive. Do you know why? Tarakanov looks surprised. Why? Thanks to the talisman. What talisman? All this is your Ogonyok. You think I don't know? When's the wedding? As soon as the war is over. The alarm clock rattled loudly in the pre-morning silence. I quickly got up, washed my face, shaved. I noted to myself in passing my face was weathered, tanned, and the scars had darkened a little, less noticeable. Now I looked older than my 20s, and not surprisingly. After all, a year we were with Maliuk 3 times on a hair's breadth from death, and how many more fights are ahead? I looked at my watch. There was still time before breakfast. I remembered that the day before, the adjutant of the squadron, Senior Lieutenant Igorov, handed me a flight book, offered to look at the records sign. For a pilot, flight book is a mirror of his affairs. It keeps strict records. Each flight is recorded to the minute. The date, the content of the combat sortie, the area of striking. And so for each day, for each month. and the stamped seal on the pages itself speaks about the importance of the flight document. I flipped through the flight book. It is interesting to calculate what was done for a year. So 16 front airfields are behind. From them exactly 100 times I took to the sky. How many of these guests fell on the enemy? According to calculations, more than 50 tons of bombs, 800 rockets, about 40,000 cannon shells and 150,000 Kapselskiy bullets. 5 enemy planes shot down in the air and 17 destroyed on the ground. 30 cars were burned. 11 anti-aircraft guns and 6 artillery batteries were suppressed. 16 tanks and self-propelled vehicles, 10 railroad cars were set on fire. More than 300 Krolts will not return to where they came from on our land. I signed in the book and thought, this is for you, bastards, for Bik-Bilatov and Kalitin, for Tolmachov and Zaplavsky, for Igorishev and Sashivko, for our favourite Prudnikov, for the agony and suffering of people who were under the heel of the occupants. After breakfast, I went to the headquarters dugout, looked for the adjutant and gave him the flight book. From him I learned that our squadron in 40 minutes should be at the formation. Shortening the time, looked into the gazebo, where pilots from the 1st Squadron immersed in reading fresh newspapers and magazines just brought propagandist, and suddenly called to the regiment commander. Comrade Guards Lieutenant Colonel, arrived on your orders. In the office were already there deputy politician, chief of staff and my commander Major Krivoshlike. Please sit down. Lykovsky gestured to a free chair. I feel that we are going to talk about a case not related to the fulfillment of the combat mission. Comrade Ned Balo. Began the commander. Major Krivoshlike is appointed head of the air and rifle service of the regiment. How do you look at taking command of the 3rd Squadron? Lykovsky looked me in the eyes with a probing look. No, he does not rush with an answer. You'd think. I was a little taken aback by the surprise, but immediately realized that the commander has already made a decision. Did not expect such a turn of events, smiled Lykovsky. Or are you afraid of responsibility? No, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel, I'm not afraid. It's just that I have no experience of working with people. But I have combat experience. And that's the most important thing. I think you'll manage. What could I say to the commander? Meanwhile, Lykovsky, walking through the office, stopped at the window and called me. Take a look, please. I looked out the window and saw in the distance our parking lot. Personnel of the squadron was assembled, and I was convinced once again that the decision had already been made. They're waiting for you, so take the 3rd Squadron. In the tone of an order said Lykovsky. Party organisation in the squadron is strong. Komsomol too, yes, and we with the Deputy Chief of Staff and the Chief of Staff will always help. So let's do it. Understood, Comrade Guards Lieutenant Colonel. Thank you for your trust. I'll try to justify it. Good, replied Lykovsky, and added Captain Korovin will be your deputy trainee for the time being. Take a closer look and find yourself a regular deputy. And now let's go, I'll introduce you to the personnel. ... I walked next to the regiment commander. On the left Ivanov, on the right of the commander Krivoshlike. At heart anxious, how will my comrades feel about my appointment? What I must now say to the personnel? How will things go in the squadron? The regiment commander apparently perfectly understood my anxiety and something quietly talking with Major Krivoshlike. Captain Korovin gave the command attention, and typing step, broke away from the formation, stepped towards Lykovsky, reported. The commander said hello. The squadron responded with a loud cheer. Lykovsky took off his cap, wiped his bald spot with a handkerchief. He was probably worried too. Comrades Guardsmen, said the commander loudly, you are heroically fighting the enemy, have passed a glorious battle path. Now we are in the Crimea to finish the remnants of fascist troops. Many of you have been awarded orders and medals. In our squadron brought up such aces as Bik-Bilatov Beda. The commander talked about the fact that young pilots learn from veterans, adopt their experience. Leonid Beda is successfully commanding the 2nd Squadron, and today Senior Lieutenant Ned Balo has been appointed commander of the 3rd Squadron. He is standing in front of you, and you all know him very well. I hope that with the new commander you will work honestly and fearlessly fight, successfully cope with the responsible business entrusted to you by the motherland. There was silence. Kapselskiy, worried, again reached for his handkerchief. Standing there, I felt I had to say something. "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel." "May I?" "Please." I stepped towards the formation. "Dear comrades, I think I will not be mistaken if on behalf of the personnel of the 3rd Squadron, I assure the command of our regiment that we will continue to be in the forefront. After dinner, the adjutant of the squadron gave me the key to the room commander's salon, as the aviators jokingly called it. I crossed the threshold of the salon, carefully circled the room with my eyes. In a small room stood neatly made soldier's bed. By the window there was a table and a chair. On the table a lantern from a shell casing. On the wall a coat rack. Modest and cosy. One can rest and reflect. Well, the adjutant left and I was left alone. I sat down on a chair, and only now I felt tired. My memory brings me back to the events of the day. It was as if I heard the words again, "Congratulations, Tulyusha, on your promotion." It was Katusha who said, "We're growing." Ivan Kondratyevich Klubov reacted. "I think you'll manage," expressed his point of view Kapselskiy. And then, sitting in the silence of the salon, again felt how my responsibility for the people, and for the combat equipment, and for the affairs of the whole squadron. I had to pass a difficult exam for commander's maturity, for independence. And take it will be strict and uncompromising examiner life. Yes, I assured the commander that the squadron will go ahead, that the good old tradition will be continued. But after all, success is achieved by the whole team. Where to start? I need helpers. I need support. I knew there is someone to rely on. These are communists and Komsomol members. These are our best guardsmen, the golden fund of the squadron. Dusk was filling the room. I lit a lantern. I remembered in my suitcase there were rough drafts of drawings and calculations. I found them and in the flickering light of the lantern began to sort out the notes, to reconstruct in my memory the details of the events that prompted me to take pencil and paper in my hands. I felt and believed that it was possible and necessary to make more effective tactical techniques that we used in the battles. In particular, the circle. If you achieve clarity and coherence, if every second to take into account, you can fundamentally change its final element. It will only at first seem difficult, but by practicing the simultaneous exit of the entire 6 or 8 from the circle, we will avoid the danger of being attacked by enemy fighters during the reorganization or collection, provide neutral protection and firepower. How to make the maneuver flexible and dynamic. Not one day, not one evening I have been thinking about it. To withdraw from the attack all at once would give us an advantage over the enemy. But the idea was still only a theory. I could erase any line on paper and draw new variants. The only way to test them was in battle. And that was a risk. Very big, very serious, for we were talking about human lives. And yet I made up my mind, because I was sure in the effectiveness of the maneuver, in its expediency. I just had to wait for a convenient, or rather a good time. In addition, the experiment required from the pilots not only to practice the maneuver, but also the appropriate psychological preparation. Consequently, you cannot hurry, and no matter how much I wanted to start testing the plan as soon as possible, I tried not to give in to temptation. There should be no accidents. Everything must be weighed carefully, with all the unknowns to deal with. Otherwise, it's a failure. It took me weeks to find it. And I kept thinking, weighing, searching. ... The night was coming to an end. I was all caught up in the calculations. I didn't fall asleep until morning. I slept soundly. But I woke up on time. I was used to getting up at the same time. The sun has already coloured the clouds at the horizon, and they seem to be petals of a huge rose. Then a piece of molten copper peeked out from behind the dark edge of the earth. It's getting bigger, brighter and brighter. A new day is born. It is easy to breathe, the air is fresh, infused with the thick aroma of the forest. At the airfield, aviation specialists are already working. Comrade Senior Lieutenant, The technical staff is preparing 6 machines for departure. I'm receiving a report from the squadron engineer, Senior Lieutenant Technician Odintsov. How many total serviceable machines? 7. Comrade Commander. 1 is on preventive maintenance, 2 are being repaired by the Palmovites. Senior Weapons Technician Verona is approaching. He reports on what the armed men are doing. We need to speed up the work the 6 flies out in an hour. At one of the vehicles I saw Senior Technician Lieutenant Popovsky, our party leader. He had already finished his work and now he was helping his comrades. I said hello and headed for another airplane. How's the mood? I asked Junior Technician Lieutenant Voloshin. Excellent, Comrade Commander. And the subordinates? The same. The same. Do they write from home? Voloshin became animated. I get 2 or 3 letters a week. Things are better in the rear. They ask that we sooner deal with the fascists. Right will fulfill their request. And I have already written, smiles Voloshin. Not far from my airplane someone is attaching a portable stand. I come closer, it's the regiment's Commissar Senior Sergeant Nikolai Zakharchenko. From over his shoulder I see a fresh issue of the combat leaflet. At the top is written in large letters, "Let's finish the remnants of the Germans in the Crimea." A small editorial contains the results of the last assaults, the names of the most distinguished pilots, air gunners, mechanics, armour, motorists of the regiment. But at the end, sad lines, "Let's avenge our navigator of the regiment guards, Major Suklishkin." I remembered how last week the regiment received heavy news. Ivan Grigorievich Suklishkin, a fearless ace, a communist, an excellent master of assault strikes, a first-class navigator, was killed. Next to the combat sheet, a map of the general front situation in the Sevastopol area, the latest reports of the Sovinform Bureau. Such portable stands were in each squadron, and at the command post of the regiment. The aviators always rushed to them. Everyone was interested in everything news from the fronts, and reports about labour affairs of our people, and events taking place abroad. Lieutenant Colonel Lyakovsky set a combat task. It was necessary to support the attack of ground units on the fascist stronghold. Leaving the commander, looked into the control room. Katyusha is working. If everything goes well, I'll return without losses. You'll come back without casualties. She said it with firm conviction, as if emphasizing that it would be exactly so and in no case could be otherwise. I somehow involuntarily fumbled for the button of my left pocket, unbuttoned the flap, and my fingers touched her present. A few days ago, when I visited Katyusha, she handed me a small envelope, saying, "It is our custom on the Volga to give gifts for good luck." In the envelope was a neatly folded handkerchief, silk, delicate. In the corner, skillfully embroidered gold star of the hero, a sprig of oak with bright green leaves. I was touched. "Thank you very much, my dear. Visibility is excellent. The blue sky is streaked with golden sunlight. I look to the left, then to the right. The wingmen, as if tied to me by invisible threads, are walking on a ledge. In the distance, above our fellow Red Star yaks, we are approaching the target. Enemy anti-aircraft gunners, of course, prepared to fire. I even imagined how the instrument makers fell down to the eyepieces, how the numbers of calculations took their places and only waited for the command. It was about to sound and the guns would rattle. It was the very moment when I had to act in accordance with the plan. I perform a maneuver, change course, change altitude. In other words, I confuse the enemy anti-aircraft gunners. And the target is already under us. A little farther away, a fire-breathing volcano. This is Sapun Mountain. The slopes are riddled with trenches, drawn by a system of barriers. Attack. I threw a single word into the air and led the 6 on a descent. Now, about to meet us a barrage of fire. I just thought, and immediately smoke balls danced around. The cabin smelled of gunpowder. Eagles, be brave. I encouraged the wingmen and at the same time tried to distract them from the fear of this wall of barrage fire. Actually, the danger zone has already been overcome. and the shells are bursting far above. The first attack was successful. We dropped a deadly load on the enemy, where there were firing points of the enemy, where the trenches stretched, one after another shimmered fiery flashes of bursting rockets, bursts of bombs. The slopes of Seipun Hill were covered with a smoky haze. The beginning is done. Another approach. Now the guns and machine guns of our OIL began to talk. The anti-aircraft guns did not stop, sending shell after shell towards us and after us. But in vain. Mission accomplished. The results of the assaults were recorded by photocinema machine guns. Now home. From the guidance station we're getting a commendation. The 6 came to the airfield in full force. All planes are intact. Only Lieutenant Karpiv's car was pierced in several places by shrapnel from a close anti-aircraft shell. Well, what did I tell you, what? Shining Katyusha greeted me. Thank you for your kind words. I shook her soft, warm hand, running to the commander with a report. Everything was perfect. And there must be trouble. Time for lunch is short, just a few minutes. A semi-truck rushes to the canteen. In the back there was no place to fall. Pilots were standing, holding each other, swaying when the car bounced on the bumps of the road. I stood by the cockpit, and suddenly, I don't know what happened, only the driver hit the brake. The car immediately stopped and the living mass, swaying, piled on top of me. My left arm, still immature, twisted, and I felt a hell of pain. Now I had to hurry not to the canteen, but to the sanitary unit. The doctor felt my arm, shook his head, told me to splint it. After lunch I learned that exactly at 15 o'clock in the same area where I drove the 6 will go with a group Krivoshlik. His deputy will be Captain Korovin. Comrade Major, you're leaving me behind? So decided the regiment commander. Krivoshlik cut off dryly. So already reported to Lykovsky, I guessed, and hurried to the headquarters. Comrade Lieutenant Colonel, there are a lot of anti-aircraft guns. I will go instead of Korovin. I already know the situation. You should rest, Comrade Ned Balo. And Korovin is being trained. He doesn't have much time left. But he doesn't have much experience either. I couldn't calm down. Experience comes with experience. You can become a fighter only in battle. Lykovsky parried. As soon as the rocket flew up into the sky, the Ilyushins began to come to life one after another. The parking lot was filled with the furious roar of powerful engines. Aircraft specialists ran fussed. Mechanics grabbed the pads from under the wheels, and the planes one after another turned out on the runway, scattered and, as if pushed off the ground, go higher and farther. The last airplane is already in the air. The group stretched out in a chain. Cars catch up with the leader, take their strictly defined place in the line. 6 made the traditional circle over the airfield, lying down on the course and moving away. Take off and kids 4 fighters cover. Mentally wish them luck. It tickles my heart. The squadron went on a combat mission without me, and all because of some ridiculous accident. Annoyed and discouraged, I go to the aviation specialists. Not far from the place where a few minutes ago stood my plane, something riveting mechanics. Comrade Commander Maliuk very diligently prepared today his machine gun, says Grisha Motovilov. And where is he? I jumped up, as if electrocuted. So he flew away with Korovin. How flew away? He ordered Captain Korovin to fly, intervened in the conversation, Sasha Chekova. I heard it myself. All right, when he arrives, we'll talk to him. If only they had everything properly. I pass from one group of aviation specialists to another. I'm waiting. How languidly time drags on. Now I sympathize with the regiment commander. I understand how hard it is for him to send crews into battle and wait for their return. And how many times a day he has to escort pilots behind the front line. Well, how's it going? I ask the duty officer. No call signs are heard, he answers. I head for the exit and look at my watch. Major Krivoshlik should be back by now. Why is there no communication with him? At the landing marker radio station, there is the regiment commander. Maybe he already knows something. The habit makes itself known. I closely examine the working part of the runway. Is there anything on it that would interfere with the landing? No. Only grass pressed by wheels, crumpled by tight air jets. The first to appear in the distance were 4 yaks. And where are the attack planes? Beats an anxious thought. Something has happened. Finally, a dot appeared. It's getting bigger. I look into the sky until my eyes hurt. Only one. I can't see any more. Aha, over there, over the side, 2 more. 2 more below. The order of battle is broken. That's a bad sign. How many are there? 5. Where's the 6th? Where? And who? The planes are stretched out, one by one approaching the boundaries of the airfield. The first one literally fell across the runway without releasing its landing gear. 4-1 after the other landed normally. I run to the damaged Ilya, on which my number. What a surprise. An ambulance has already stopped near it. Then flew up Commanders Emka and Lieutenant Colonel Yakovsky about something asks confused Korovin. He, shuffling from foot to foot, something incoherently answers. I step aside and then I see how from the cockpit shooter pulled out bloody Malyuk. I rush to him. Anton, my friend. What's wrong with you? Anton. I bent down, put my hands around his head, turned him to me. No signs of life. Eyes closed, lips compressed. Lost consciousness, the doctor explains. The shrapnel hit him in the head. Anton. 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 I exhaled and felt my throat spasm. The ambulance takes Malyuk to the hospital. Tears come to my eyes. How many times we got into difficult bindings with him. How many times we were on the verge of death. We survived, fought again. I thought we'd go through the whole war like this, all the way to Berlin. And here we are. My friend fought back. The commander was still talking to Korovin. He was either reprimanding him or finding out some details. I wanted to know how it happened. Only 14 years later I learned the details from Malyuk's mouth. The first approach of the Ilyushin was thwarted by enemy fighters. A dozen of Me-109 attacked the 6, and the group fell apart. Korovin broke away from his comrades, and 4 messers attacked him, attacking in pairs. Fending them off, Malyuk set one on fire, then the second. Korovin should have maneuvered, and he went in a straight line. This used the 3rd messer and came in from below. Malyuk tried to tell Korovin to turn away, but the connection did not work. And the messer had already opened fire. It was good that the yaks arrived. They saved Korovin from certain death. But Malyuk. Pilot Ivan Anisimov and air gunner Arkady Zakharov did not return from this flight. Their attack aircraft was shot down by a direct hit of anti-aircraft shells and fell in the target area. The fighting in the Sevastopol area was coming to an end. My arm had already gotten stronger, and I was allowed to fly again. Korovin left the regiment, and my deputy was temporarily appointed Lieutenant Karpiv. One day Katusha suggested, "Take me, Anatoly, as an air gunner. I beg you very much. I can't put you in danger. The risk is too great. But you take risks too, and I want to protect you. Who will do it the way Malyuk did? Only me. I could be shot down by an anti-aircraft gun. Thank you. That's comforting. No, Katya, I can't take such a thing on my conscience. I can't. Understand me." He was saying that Katya was a person of fine soul, a friend and comrade, ready to share both happiness and grief. How good that is. And to end the conversation, I explained. "I already have a shooter." "Who?" "Junior Sergeant Matveev, motor officer." "Dmitri is a good guy. I can only envy him," sighed the distressed Katya. We had already had a few lessons with Matveev. He was quick-witted, fearless, quick to react. Later he proved himself a worthy successor to Anton Malyuk. Still fresh were the joyful memories of May Day, and then a new holiday, May 9th, stormed Sevastopol. A week later, and the entire Crimean Peninsula was cleared of Hitler's invaders. There was a temporary lull. But we knew ahead new fights, new battles. The enemy was broken, but still strong. Replenishment arrived in the regiment. Young pilots had to be introduced into the combat formation to teach the art of defeating the enemy. Flights alternated with lessons in classrooms. Young people mastered the theory, studied tactical techniques, hardened ideologically. I worked a lot with newcomers, taking care that as soon as possible they became real air fighters. Now there was an opportunity to analyze in detail the most successful of our operations, the reasons for failure. Everyone understood that the war without casualties does not happen. But it is possible to avoid unjustified losses, and it is necessary. This was discussed at party and Komsomol meetings, at flight tactical conferences. And even more interesting was the conversation about the combat maturity of the commander. War is not only a strict examination, a severe test for the soldier, it is a great school of courage and combat maturity of the commander. I, a young commander, in many ways assisted Kapselskiy and Krivoshlek. Very much did for my commanding formation of the party organization. I still remember the party meetings, which considered the burning issues of our front life and the vanguard role of the communist in combat, and the provision of assistance to young people, the first time flying on a combat mission, and the intransigence to violators of discipline, and the leadership of the Komsomol. I remember the last meeting on Crimean soil. It was in Sarabuz. We all realized then the Crimean operation is over, but the war is not over, and the regiment will certainly be transferred to another front. Therefore the Guards felt it necessary to talk about the results of the fighting, to consult on how best to conduct combat work in the coming battles. Our deputy commander, Major Ivanov, perfectly felt the spirit of the time, was able to choose the most relevant agenda. He was loved and respected by the whole regiment. A man developed and sociable, he disposed people to himself, knew their needs and demands, was able to create a fighting spirit, mobilize for patriotic deeds. 3 times our regiment was marked in the orders of the Supreme Command, said, speaking, Alexander Stepanovich. Here in the Crimea our guardsmen acted in the Stalingrad way. The pilots made 4 or 5 combat sorties every day, striving for the quickest liberation of the Soviet Crimea. In total, we made 537 combat sorties here. Listening to his speech, I thought about our communists, about how they fought to strengthen discipline, how to ensure constant combat readiness, to improve the efficiency of sorties. Here, for example, the chairman of the meeting, a member of the party bureau, navigator of the regiment Streltsov. While still a squadron commander, he once stormed enemy artillery positions on the northern and northeastern slopes of Gornaya Height. The airplane was damaged, the aileron of the left plane was jammed. Returning home, Streltsov over the airfield gave his air gunner Matkazin a command. Jump. It's impossible to control the plane. But Matkazin replied, Until you jump, I won't leave the car. And then the communist Streltsov decides to save the machine. It cost incredible efforts, but almost uncontrollable attack aircraft he still managed to land. Streltsov later explained to the commander and deputy commander, It was a pity to abandon such a wonderful machine. And how hard our technical staff works. Day and night, in the rain and in the cold wind, our aviation specialists work selflessly, caring only about one thing: to provide the pilots with serviceable flying tanks equipped with full ammunition. Difficulties do not frighten the guardsmen. They understand this is the only way to bring victory over the Nazis. How many times have I marveled, when do our technicians and mechanics, armourers and motorists sleep? When do they rest? In the evening they are busy at the vehicles. When you come at night they are at the parking lot. When you come at dawn, they are already here long ago. The one fiddles at the chassis, the one in the cabin, the one listens attentively to the work of the steel heart of the sludge. And how selflessly the girls work. Look, hanging 100-kilogram bombs. What about 100? Didn't they hang presents weighing 250 kilograms under the wings of the Ilyushin? And all this quickly, in a short time. As if guessing my thoughts, Ivanov started talking about the technical staff. about how the best mechanics, communists, Konomets, Shevchenko, Voloshin, Goncharenko with their hard work lead aviation specialists, are well-worked Komsomol members. Sergeants Dubov Babich, for example, cut the repair time of the aircraft exactly half, and the attack aircraft was released to the task almost a day earlier than expected. Did not keep silent deputy and the shortcomings. Young pilots on the approach to the target broke away from the leader and lagged behind the group. Others had little knowledge of the combat areas, did not observe ground targets, and therefore could not give sufficient intelligence on the enemy and complete data on the results of the attack. Not all aerial gunners were cautious. Passionate about shooting at ground targets, they spent almost all the ammunition, forgetting that it is intended mainly to repel enemy fighters. Then Major Streltsov suggested let each veteran take patronage over the newcomer and teach him the art of defeating the enemy. All unanimously supported him. Ivan Kondratyevich Klubov spoke briefly but intelligently. He was for us a model of a real communist. We tried to imitate him. And if they said here at the meeting that a communist is a living example for the youth, our thoughts turned to such people as Lykovsky, Ivanov, Krivoshlek, Klubov. Yes, much was given to our winged guard family by this meeting. Soon, in accordance with the decision made at the meeting, the regiment held a flight tactical conference. It began in the morning and ended almost at midnight. And all this time the search continued, inquisitively studied the best practices, hotly discussed the most important problems. 17 tactical issues were analysed and summarised, taking into account past offensive operations. Methods of exit attack aircraft in the target area. Interaction with their ground troops. There was talk about the battle order with the use of multiple approaches, about the effectiveness of the use of each type of weapon, the preservation of orientation when attacking the target for 15 to 20 minutes on the battlefield. Regiment veterans persistently taught young pilots to hit tanks with special bombs, rockets, fire 37mm guns. They taught to attack airfields, railroad stations, echelons. As a result, the tactical arsenal of the regiment was significantly replenished and improved. And I was still nurturing and testing my idea, a method of gathering the group after the attack. On the next day after the conference, the aviators were offered to make an excursion trip to the places of battles in the Sevastopol area to visit Cape Chasniz, where, as we already knew, the Nazis had the last airfield, which we repeatedly stormed. This trip turned out to be very interesting for us also by the fact that already on the way to Sevastopol we found traces of our work. Or piles of mangled metal by the road. Not long ago they were huge trucks, transporting enemy soldiers from one part of the front to another, and over there to the side frozen tanks and self-propelled vehicles. Stop, driver. These boxes should be examined more carefully after all. We are also called tank fighters. We feel the holes, look at the ruptured metal. Good results of assaults. Here we start an improvised lesson for young pilots how to determine the types of tanks and self-propelled vehicles. What is the degree of their armour? Where are the most vulnerable places from onboard fire? Relocation. Let's go further. The closer Sevastopol, the more craters, broken military equipment, fallen trees. In Sevastopol the heart shrinks even more. Ruins, ruins, ruins. At the Chasniz airfield, the remains of enemy airplanes burned by us. I remembered how in the sky above this very place a close exploded anti-aircraft shell deprived me of the ability to control the speed on the instrument. I turned toward the sea. It was raging angrily. The anti-aircraft guns sent shells in pursuit, but I flew on. My wingman followed me. With a right turn I described a wide arc over the coastline and got away from the anti-aircraft guns. This trip was useful and necessary. DUE continued to prepare young people for battles. I was preparing for new battles, and not in one but in two directions at once. First, as a leading air leader. Secondly, as a ground leader of the team. As a pilot I already had combat experience, and with young people had something to share. But as a commander I still had to learn a lot. I had to carve out time to study, to work on myself. I was supplied with books by the regiment's party commander, Captain Umansky. Alexander Timofeyevich willingly undertook to help me. I owe him a lot. I am grateful to him from the bottom of my heart for his generous help. It was in Krynichnaya, in the Donbass, where I became a candidate member of our Leninist party. There, in Krynichnaya, Umansky believed me. Now he was patronizing me again, taking care that I became a competent and good commander. I decided to consult him about my deputy. I think Senior Lieutenant Nikolai Davidov could be a good deputy commander. I expressed my thoughts to Umansky. I have known him since his cadet days. He was a petty officer of our group. He flies well. He knows how to work with people. You talk to him, find out if he'll agree. I know him, but how will he take the fact that he was once your boss, and now he has to work under you? But my fears were unnecessary. How many of our guys, pupils of the Voroshilovgrad school, are left in the regiment? I once asked Nikolai. 3, Samaiko, you and me, he answered. It would be good to fight side by side. You know, come and join me in the 3rd Squadron as a deputy. Eh? I'm a soldier. If I'm ordered, I'll go. Now it was up to the regiment commander. Meanwhile, in accordance with the order of the People's Commissar of Defence, our regiment as part of the division was being transferred to the 3rd Belarusian Front. We began to prepare for relocation. The route was laid out. I folded the map, unfolded it again, folded it again. Wow, the line of the 2nd segment of our way lay quite close to Izium. I wish I could at least look into my native house, hug my relatives. I sighed, folded the map. And the buttons of the tablet crunched harder than usual. ... Squadrons take off at 20-minute intervals. It's time for us. I take off, make a circle over the airfield, go to the 2nd. The height is already 500 meters. 2 Quadruple Ilyushin 3rd Squadron is heading north ahead, a big flight. Sunlight streams from the height. Visibility excellent. The steel heart of the airplane works smoothly, rhythmically. The mood is elevated. For a minute I seem to be detached from the harsh reality. It seems that there is no war, that no force is able to break this grace, to wake up the earth slumbering under the southern sun. I can't even believe that only a few days ago this sky was strewn with fire trails, it was covered with smoke, and there were rumblings of gun thunder. But it lasted only a minute. I'm switching over the spew. Dima, how is the 2nd Force going? Everything is in order, Comrade Commander, it is following us. I look around the space and again turn my gaze down to the verdant Crimean land. It is hard for me to part with it. Here I became a party member, a squadron commander. In the Crimean sky, already past the exam for commander's maturity. Under the wings Sivash. So, goodbye, sunny Crimea, I shouted, opening the lantern window, and the wind carried my words into the bluing distance. Now Belarus is waiting for us. During the flight we make 4 landings in Zaporozhye, Kharkov, Oral and Smolensk. In Kharkov and Oral we sit for 2 days waiting for the regiment headquarters and rear. There is time to visit the city. I'm walking through the centre of Kharkov. My heart clenches with pain. Ruins, charred walls, empty eye sockets of windows. In Oral it's the same. Anger boils in my chest. I know from now on I will beat the enemy even harder. ... Now the difficult flight is behind us. We were sheltered by a small Belarusian village, Jarvanenki. The locals are genuinely happy to see us, smiling. Many of them have tears of joy in their eyes. Today there is a holiday in our honor in the village, and for the first time I see Belarusian national costumes. There are songs, music and dances in the streets and on the village square. The girls invite us, and we quickly master Bulba, Lievonika and 5 more cheerful Belarusian dances. There is a column of dust on the dance floor. But we don't notice it, we are completely absorbed in the fun. And there is nothing more pleasant than this music, these girls' smiles, this wild dance. And very near, a few minutes' walk from the village square, there is a wide field, as if nestled against the darkening hulk of the forest. They do not sow or plough that field, it now serves as a front airfield. Here and there, spreading their wings, are our Alyushins. The June sun scorched the grass, and the field became yellowish-brown. Only along the forest, where there was more shade, where the soil retained moisture, The grass is lush, thick, green. Soon we settled in the new place, and days flowed after days the harsh everyday life of the war. During this period, in the 3rd and 1st Squadrons made some changes. My deputy became a senior Lieutenant Nikolai Davidov, who had previously served in the 1st Squadron as a flight commander. Arrived replenishment, 3 young pilots, and Karpiv, Koshushkin and Maslentsev were appointed wing commanders. The commander of the 1st Squadron became Dmitry Zhabinsky, his deputy Nikolai Semeyko. Leonid Beda, as before, commanded the 2nd Squadron, his deputy was Anatoly Brandis. Now, the flying staff of the regiment half consisted of young people untrained and had no experience of combat operations. Involuntarily I remembered how the 2 of us with Igor Kalatin, just like these newcomers, stood in front of the regiment commander and answered his questions. A little more than a year has passed since that time. And how many events, how many experiences, what fine boys the war took away. In each of the 3 newcomers I saw myself, and for them I was what Bick, Krivoslik, Lyakhovsky had been for me in my time. We switched roles, there was a shift in time. But the task remained the same. Newcomers should become on a par with veterans. They should be taught the art of fighting. Each of them has the desire to fly, to destroy the enemy. Everyone sees it as their sacred duty. They pass the school of ideological hardening successfully, so they need combat training. And I make sure that every free hour was dedicated to them, so that the newcomers quickly improve their flying skills. Gathering replenishment under the wing of my airplane, I tell about the combat path of our division, our regiment, about the veterans of the squadron and their exploits, about those with whom we will have to live side by side, shoulder to serve and fight. I see that they are looking at me very carefully, listening with concentration. Are there any questions? Yes, there are. They are interested in the situation above the battlefield. I draw as thoroughly, in detail, as truthfully as possible. I emphasize there are many difficulties, no less dangers. You will have to break through the fire barrier more than once before reaching the target. Imagine only half a minute before the attack begins. Each of these 30 seconds is accounted for, each of them as if compressed by the tension of your muscles, your senses. Not a single wrong move, all actions must be calculated, precise, and anti-aircraft shells are bursting nearby, and the smell of gunpowder fumes penetrates into the cabin. It seems that all the routes of Alikon, all the shells of numerous anti-aircraft guns are intended for you alone. That a Fokker or a pair of Messers is about to fall on you. Your nerves are on edge. But don't be afraid. Keep the car on its own course, stay in formation. Think about the fact that you have already passed the wall of fire if the commander did not make an anti-aircraft maneuver, that the enemy fighters will be repulsed by your faithful friend and air gunner, sitting with his back to you and vigilantly protecting you from all accidents. Accustom yourself to the idea that in any case you should win over the enemy, and take into account that the battle does not like weak, does not forgive mistakes, uncertain actions. No fear, no confusion. Courage, determination is the highest quality of a guardsman. You have to be focused, restrained and observant. So training. I won't let anyone go into combat until he thoroughly mastered the aircraft, piloting techniques, and learns the combat area by heart. It turned out that I copied Lyakhovsky almost word for word. History repeats itself. I smiled at my own thoughts and looked at my charges. For some reason the guys shrank back. Apparently this was not the kind of conversation they expected from me. I wish it were sooner, said Kariv, or the war is about to end, and we will not smell the gunpowder. Your aspiration is commendable, I answered Kariev, but let's not be in a hurry. We must go into battle well prepared. Those days when we sent newcomers into battle have already passed, so start studying the experience of our advanced crews. Get used to the situation, get well acquainted with the area of combat operations. Speaking of observation, try to draw the dials of your watches from memory. No peeking. What numbers are on them? What hands? The boys are intrigued. Drawing, recalling individual subtleties. Done? That's it. Now show each of you your watches. Compare the drawing with the original. Of course there are mistakes. I sympathized with Junior Lieutenant Kariv right away. He was tall, slender, trim, with an open, strong-willed face, with serious, intelligent eyes. It was felt that he was preparing for flight seriously, realizing the great responsibility. And what if we take him as a wingman? Once the headquarters of the 3rd Belarusian Front called all the leading groups of attack aircraft of our division to the front line. They were ordered to leave in the General Army field uniform, without epaulets and insignia. This was done in order not to attract the attention of enemy intelligence. Reconnaissance of the terrain took place in the strip of the supposed offensive of the troops between Orsha and Vitebsk. Here we were familiarized with the system of enemy defenses, which consisted of 3 lines. From the heights dominating the terrain, the enemy had a good view of the positions of our troops. We were informed about the firepower and combat composition of the enemy units, and immediately set the task to destroy firepoints, to strike at artillery positions of the fascists, deepening to a distance of 5 to 7 kilometers. After our troops will master the first line of Hitlerite defenses, the division's attack aircraft will have to clear the way for the advancing tank units, introduced into the breach to develop the offensive operation. In conclusion, we were offered to take turns to look in the stereo tube. We moved forward along the lines of the message closer to the enemy positions. One by one, we carefully make our way to the observation post. The guns are beating. Every now and then rustle overhead shells. Nearly exploded one another, a mine slapped. A large shrapnel flew very close and hit the sand. I went down into the dark dugout. Someone, holding me lightly by the arm, brought me to the 2-horned stereo tube. I fixed my eyes on its eyepieces. The trenches, barriers drawn by the optics swam and danced before my eyes. I could see how the Mariva was swaying over the ground, how it was breathing heavily under the weight of foreign tanks and bellowing guns. Well, very well does the front commanders, inviting us to a joint conversation, familiarizing us with the plan of the upcoming operation, I thought, and, having made amendments to the plan, began to observe what was done further behind the first line of enemy defences. I carefully studied the enemy defence, selected targets which not today, tomorrow we will strike, providing the necessary support for our ground troops in the breakthrough strip. Oh, there will be a lot of work for attack aircraft. In the evening we were already at our airfield. The pilots and technical staff were ordered to get ready. And the next morning all the leading groups, led by the navigator of the regiment Major Streltsov, flew to the area of the upcoming combat operations to inspect it from the air, to determine the coordinates of the main targets and establish a system of air defense. We went, of course, not light, and the whole group made 2 runs with bombing and assault. The enemy met us with a barrage of fire, fiercely beat anti-aircraft guns, streaked the sky traces of Ehrlichon. But we were out of their reach. Everyone returned home. Immediately after landing, the leaders gathered for a methodical meeting. The question is the same: how best to conduct battles. The offensive begins tomorrow, and we must hurry. Pilots prepared all day. All received large-scale photographic plates, on which clearly visible enemy defences, artillery firing positions, trenches and trenches. It was necessary to study this area well, to remember the system of the enemy's fire means, to know by what signs it was easy to distinguish our tanks from the enemy's, what was the speed of both, what was the armament, how to build a manoeuvre for an attack. It was evening. All the personnel of the regiment gathered right in the parking lot for the traditional meeting, and everyone understood tomorrow into battle, tomorrow a new test of moral and fighting qualities of each and all together, tomorrow a test of courage, fortitude, skill. We remembered the rallies before the liberation of Donbass, before the battle for the Dnieper, then before the liberation of Crimea. Now on the agenda is the slogan, "Let's liberate our native Belarus." Party commander of the 3rd Squadron senior technician Lieutenant Boris Popovsky says excitedly, passionately, "Let's liberate our native Belarus." Our hearts beat in response. Barely dawn dawned, as everything was in motion, measured, calculated, clearly calibrated. The cooks were the first to start the new day. Breakfast is ready, and the flight crew is already in the dining room. We have breakfast quickly. In 10 minutes the canteen is empty. Waitresses, seeing us off, ask us not to be late for lunch. They are motherly care that we ate on time, that the food was tasty and nutritious. They also share with us the pain of loss. How many tears have I seen on their faces when someone's place at the table was empty, when an appliance placed on the table was left untouched, so another one didn't come back from the battle. Today women see us off with special warmth and anxiety. I want to say something affectionate and cheerful to them, but the driver of the truck is already signalling, and I, grasping the side with my hands, jump into the back of the truck. Let's go. Let's go. At the command post Bida, Jabinski and I come to a large table on which the map of the combat situation. Liakovsky looks worried, but his voice is steady and calm. The troops of the 3rd Belarusian Front, under the command of General Cherniakovsky, today go on the offensive in the Orsha-Vitebsk direction, the commander reports. Artillery preparation is already underway. It will end at 6000, and immediately the attacking aircraft of our division must support the actions of tanks and infantry, breaking through the first strip of enemy defences. Our regiment will begin the first attack at 6:30. Within 45 minutes, echeloned actions of 3-6 from the combat order circle must suppress firepower. Liakovsky point is circled on the map area of action. The order of takeoff 6, the first leading Jabinski, the second leading Beda, the third leading Nedbajlo. Takeoff of the first group on a green rocket from the command post. Subsequent sorties in readiness. We leave the control center and hurry to their squadrons. At my plane is Grigory Motovilov. Seeing me, runs towards me with a report. Comrade Commander, the airplane is ready for departure. Checked all the nuts. The engine is running normally. He emphasizes the last word. Excellent. I answer him in tone, greeting Sasha Cherkova and Anatoly Baranov. Pilots and air gunners squadron gathered at my plane. I explain them the combat mission, clarify the details of the future attack. To the planes. In a minute, all in their places. And now on the bright background of the sky, describing an arc in the shape of a question mark, brightly flashed green flame rocket. The first 6 flew away. 10 minutes passed and Leonid Beda's 6 got off to a flying start. Here Ilyushin one after another rush to take off and in a clear line go to the west. In a few minutes it will be the turn of my group. I put on leather gloves, parachute and sit in the cockpit. I check the fittings, establish radio contact with the leading couples and the regiment commander. I look at my watch. Time. Cautions launch. I give the command, and the parking lot at once announced by the rolling roar of engines. Heavily loaded with bombs and shells, winged machines stretched to the start. ... height 600 meters. Forests, fields, winding rivers and meadows are passing below. Every minute we are getting closer to the target. Checking communications. Shine 1. Blesk 1. I'm caution 03. Can you hear me? Over. Now we have to switch to detailed orientation. And I'm comparing the map with the terrain. I hear Leonid Beda's voice on the radio. His group is finishing the attack, and we're going to replace it. I continue to read the terrain. At the bottom shone bright spoloky and stretched, rushed to the west fiery threads. This is our legendary Katyusha. We are going over the no-man's strip of land. Smoke columns are visible on it. Their origin is not difficult to establish. These are the villages set on fire by the fascists. And here is the panorama in front of me, a wide field, everything is in motion. Fire, smoke. There is a brutal battle. A suffocating, sour odour penetrates into the cabin. Price seconds, a rising enemy anti-aircraft guns are firing. Shells burst at our height, so I order the group to perform anti-aircraft manoeuvre to prevent the enemy to shoot. We go lower, and the battlefield now appears before us close up. Thick smoke obscures the targets. Somewhere here must be artillery and mortar positions of the Nazis. They are, of course, camouflaged, and it is difficult to see them as it is, and then there is smoke. A flash. Another one. I look closely. Ah, there you are. I can't refrain from exclaiming, noticing the barrels, as if pressed into the ground carriages, shelters, boxes with shells. The enemy's artillery battery has demasked itself, but it is not alone here. I notice another firing position in the side. And the anti-aircraft guns are not relenting. I move aside and prepare to attack. A quick look up, our yaks are barraging. I request a guidance station and get permission to work. Cautions, attack. Follow me. I command my group and, having made a U-turn, attack the target from a dive. Circle begins to act. Stormtroopers pour enemy anti-aircraft battery Heroism and bombs. 15 minutes later, in the place where there was just a firing position of the enemy, only columns of smoke. Now a strike on other targets. ... After the 6th approach, the guidance station allows us to return home. The 6 go in a wedge formation. The wingmen are satisfied the task has been successfully completed. The combat sortie in the new operation took place. We made our first contribution to the liberation of Belarus from the Nazi invaders. The pilots come to me, report on the fulfillment of the task. We rejoice at our common success. The targets were hit, and our planes not a scratch. The sun is scorching mercilessly. Airplanes' cladding is heated, engines, as from ovens, are steaming with heat. There's a haze over the hoods. But the mechanics have no time to wait, and they, burning their hands and drenching themselves with sweat, are preparing the machines for new flights. I hear the squadron engineer hurrying his subordinates. Commands are sounding, instruments are ringing. Stepladders pass from hand to hand. Slap the flaps of bomb hatches. Armed, motorists act according to a clearly developed scheme, quickly, confidently perform the necessary operations. In a hurry, guys, no time. They have to refuel and equip the vehicles. They have to go there again, in the thick of battle, where the advancing troops are waiting for them. I want to hug each of them, to say thank you for diligence, for selflessness, but the situation does not dispose to sentimentality. I ask Senior Technician Lieutenant Odintsov to pay special attention to the engines, because in this heat they cool down very slowly. It is necessary to check control systems, armament, instrumentation. The front sky was harsh here in Belarus. On the first day, each pilot made several combat sorties. My group flew 3 times. Enemy fighters were pouncing on us, anti-aircraft guns were beating frantically. It seemed unbelievable that we broke through the dense curtain of fire without any losses. We came back tired, soaked with tension, but proud of the consciousness of our involvement in the operational offensive of the Soviet troops. Comrade Commander, when will it be our turn? For the 2nd time in a day, asks me Kiriv. In his eyes I read impatience, the desire to go into battle sooner. Soon, Kolya, soon. I reassure him. As soon as we'll finish with anti-aircraft guns in our area. In the meantime, get in the cockpit and practice your actions to the point of automaticity. Study the area of the upcoming battles. It will come in handy. The 2nd day was no less tense than the first. The enemy resisted stubbornly, and our troops moved forward slowly. The fascists kept bringing reserves, many tanks and artillery into the battle, which added to our work. We appeared where it was especially hard for the infantry. This day, young pilots Kiriv and Obozny received a baptism of fire. Kiriv showed himself perfectly, acted confidently and bravely. Obozny did not do well. After the flights, I gave him a brief review, pointed out the mistakes, gave some advice. On the 3rd day of anti-aircraft fire weakened noticeably, but the enemy aircraft became more. Messerschmitts and Fokkers relentlessly hunted for Ilami, but to a dense combat order of attack aircraft, covered by Yak, did not dare to approach. They could not approach us, and when the attackers became in a circle and began to process the target. But it was only necessary for one to break away from the group and fall behind, as enemy fighters immediately pounced on the prey. Some crews fell under fire of fascist fighters at the moment when the sails were rearranged in the combat order wedge. This happened to Lieutenant Obozny. ... When, after the assault on artillery positions, Illy went to the assembly, Obozny's plane was cut off from the group by anti-aircraft fire. 2 Focke-Wulfs took advantage of this and attacked Obozny. Hitler's pilots had already given some cues, but our fighters came to the aid of our comrade. Fokkers hastily retreated. When Obozny sat down, we found a lot of holes in his Ilyushin. He got off happily, said the pilots. This episode hastened my realization of my own method of gathering a group. Theoretically, it had already been developed. However, the tense combat situation did not leave time for experimentation. Now it became clear that it was time to implement it. On the eve of the flight on a new mission, I briefed the pilots of my plan and explained the order of operations. After the planes will make attacks from the circle, I give the command end, which for the first time will be duplicated by a green rocket. On the last segment of the circle, my plane will describe a curve, as if moving to a new attack. But this is only a deceptive maneuver to mislead the enemy about our further intentions. In reality, instead of diving on the target, will be followed by a sharp turn to the right, which will mean the beginning of the collection. As soon as my plane goes to the right, the 3 attack aircraft following me quickly take up position to the right, close to each other. The last pair cuts a circle at top speed toward their territory. I then pick up the 3 attack aircraft in a right turn and bring the entire foursome into a left turn at slow speed to allow the remaining pair to attach. Meanwhile, the air gunners of the 4, being in an advantageous position, have a close view of the rear hemisphere and, in case of danger, all of a sudden open heavy fire on the enemy, protecting the attached pair. The estimated time of full assembly should not exceed 40 seconds. In the target area we are met by barrage fire. Above and below, the caps of bursts are blowing up. We're moving in tight formation, covering fighters' barrage over us, protecting us from unpleasant surprises. The target is about to appear, and I stare down. I distinguish dark rectangles of enemy tanks. Now to action. 6 descends, strikes in the right bearing, then becomes a circle. Stormtroopers, alternately diving, perform 5 runs in a row. Chopper operates without fail, burning and explode from a direct hit of P-tanks. The end. I command when the last plane of the 3rd pair comes in for a dive. Then I count down a few seconds and vigorously turn the machine. My wingmen rush towards me from different directions. Here they turn all of a sudden, and half a minute later, we are already going dense wedge of 6. So the maneuver finally successfully implemented. Calculations were correct. Quickly, coherently, and clearly acted all pilots. Soon this method of collection became the property of pilots of the entire regiment. And then at one of the meetings of the division leadership staff, General Kryukin said about my method, "This is the most perfect and expedient of all the methods that have been proposed here. Enemy defenses are broken. The enemy is retreating. Our troops, firmly seized the initiative, successfully developed the offensive along the entire front. Every day the territory of Byelorussia liberated from the occupants becomes more and more extensive. The Soviet troops went far ahead, leaving behind, in the rear, a lot of surrounded enemy units. These days the regiment received news Lieutenant Colonel Lykovsky was appointed deputy commander of the division. The regiment takes Major Streltsov. The new commander we know well. This is one of the most experienced pilots of the regiment, a participant in the fighting on Kok in Gol. For the heroism shown there was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. Young people willingly flew with him on missions, fully trusted the rich experience of his commander. Old-timers of the regiment was remembered quite unpleasant episode that occurred with Streltsov. Subsequently, everything fell into place, and he was right, but what happened almost cost him his life. It happened back at the Mayas front. The regiment had a park day, and all airplanes were subjected to a thorough inspection. Many of them were in need of repair, and the higher authority authorized it. But here in the midst of repair work at the airfield flew to the general and ordered to urgently send a group to perform a combat mission. With difficulty managed to select only 5 airplanes. Already at the start of another Ilyushin was delayed because of a detected coolant leak. Only 4 airplanes took to the air. Led the group Streltsov. And a few minutes later he radioed, "I'm coming back." The engine works with interruptions. 4 dropped bombs on the range and sat down. Streltsov reported to the general about the reason for the return. The general called Klubov and ordered to try the engine. Klubov jumped into the cockpit, started the engine, tried it in all modes. The thrust is good, the instrument readings are stable. The engineer was perplexed. Parachute, ordered the general. Having put on a parachute, the general deftly jumped on the wing, sat in the cockpit, started the engine, taxied to the start and took off. Ilyushin ran over the airfield, making all sorts of figures. The engine was running smoothly and rhythmically. "I would be very happy if all airplanes so well working engines," said the general, jumping off the wing of the just-landed attack aircraft. "Streltsov is just a coward, and for this they shoot at the front." It was unexpected for Lyakhovsky, for us, and especially for Streltsov himself. Lyakhovsky knew him as a pilot of high courage, honest, direct and very decent man. We young pilots and many veterans of Stalingrad learned from him the art of defeating the enemy. And suddenly a coward. No, there's something wrong here. And Lyakhovsky hurried to the telephone. Soon the deputy commander of the division, Colonel Prutkov, arrived at the regiment. He knew each pilot well and had to sort out what had happened to report the details personally to the commander of the Air Army. General Kryukin knew Streltsov as a brave air fighter, bold, fearless, determined. "I believe Streltsov. Let him fly," replied the commander. In the evening Streltsov was told about it. He was silent. Only on the stunned, pale face began to appear blush the pilot came to his senses after several hours of the most difficult experiences. Soon another combat sortie took place, and Streltsov led a group on a mission. The engine of his airplane worked with interruptions. At the risk of his life, Streltsov continued the flight and completed the combat mission. After that, the motor was thoroughly checked and found a malfunction. The cam roller had burst. When Streltsov learned about it, he came to the disassembled engine, took from the hands of the technician ill-fated part, held, as if weighing, and then, swinging, threw it far into the field. On June 26 there, reconnaissance detected several dozens of enemy echelons on the Orsha-Tolochin section of the railroad. The command decided not to let them go to the rear. "You, Comrade Nedbalo," said the new commander of the regiment, putting a combat task in front of me, "it is necessary to strike at the enemy echelons and delay their dispatch. And again my group is in the air. We are going to the right of Orsha. Among the green of fields and forests darkens a narrow, long ribbon, going far to the southwest. In several places it seems to be covered by small strips. Above them are white hazes. These are echelons. I descend and, flying to the right of the railroad, count the trains on the specified section. There are 23 of them. I decide to strike 10 to 12 kilometers east of the Tolochin station, lock up the trains, and then deal with them. We go in a dense combat order at an angle of 20 degrees to the railroad, drop bombs on one of the echelons and, standing in a circle, begin to iron trains. There is no enemy in the air. Our fighters are on the alert. And below the tanks are burning, ammunition is bursting, and only splinters are flying from the cars. Having finished with one echelon, we move on to another, and then to the third. 2 days later we learned that our advancing troops got as trophies enemy echelons with equipment and looted Nazi property, which could not go through the station. Tolochin Hitlerites, who were fleeing, were not up to repairing the destroyed by us section of the railroad track. The front was rolling further and further to the west. We continued to support our advancing troops, stormed the retreating columns of vehicles, processed echelons at the station Gorodziki, struck at the enemy grouping, which was in the so-called Minsk cauldron. The initiative on the ground and in the air was firmly in our hands. Now there was less risk, and I gradually introduced young people into the ranks. Each of the young pilots had already made several combat sorties, though in simplified conditions, each clearly understood how to behave in combat. Kairi flew with me in a pair and reliably covered me from the rear. "Will be an excellent pilot," I rejoiced at the success of the newcomer. The rapid offensive of the Soviet armoured and motor mechanized units caused panic in the enemy troops, demoralized them, and Hitlerites surrendered in thousands. Long lines of the enemy soldiers who had laid down their arms slowly wandered to the east. But in the rear of our advancing units remained encircled groups of the enemy, who were in no hurry to lay down their weapons, and did not lose hope to get through to their own. On the morning of July 8th, one of such organized groups quite numerous was approaching Minsk from the southeast. Tanks, artillery vehicles with manpower moved quickly along the forest road to the crossing of the river Svislok. In this place we were to bombard the enemy column. ... The terrain is perfectly visible. Looking for the target. What appeared before my eyes amazed me. On the forest road was moving enemy column, stretching for kilometers. Its head had already reached Svislok. In a wide clearing near the crossing a lot of cars and various equipment were piled up. Now we will help you to eliminate the traffic jam, I thought, leading the group in the right bearing on the target. The bombs lay exactly. Now our fail-safe circle. The enemy clearly did not expect this. No anti-aircraft cover. Do not hit Elikonov. This is good, especially if we take into account that today half of the group young people. Circle gradually shifts towards the road. Cars are burning, Hitlerites are running away in panic, and we press on the gaslights. Suddenly some dark drops flashed nearby. What is it? I strain my mind. I've never seen anything like that before. And immediately I notice that the fire is coming from tank guns. The barrels are raised to the top, and each time above the grey-green boxes rises a cloud of gunpowder smoke. Attention! The airplanes are being hit from tanks. Watch out! I warn my wingman and immediately hit the tanks with rockets. The ground is rapidly flying towards me. I can clearly see the fascists floundering. I am gaining altitude, and my gunner is firing from a machine gun. I watch how the pilots act. But what is it with Kiriv? It's time to take the car out of dive. What's he doing? Take it out, take it out. I shout to him on the radio, but immediately I notice a treacherous trickle of flame and smoke running from under the plane. Suddenly the burning attack aircraft with a huge shell is thrust into a cluster of enemy tanks and vehicles. Orange-white flames spurted out, rolled, poured along the column, and a gigantic fire blazed on the forest road. Kiriv, Kiriv. How did it happen? The enemy will pay dearly for your death, and the 5 planes are rushing to the attack again. The last run. I long look at the flames rising high above the forest road, that blazing heart of a fearless young man, my wingman, for whom this combat flight became a flight to immortality. ... The news of the brave Falcon's feat travelled all over the front. The political department dedicated a special leaflet to him, which told about the heroic deed of Komsomol member Nikolai Kiriv, who repeated the feat of Captain Costello's crew. Together with Kiriv died, and his air gunner Safanov, who also fulfilled his sacred duty to his beloved motherland to the end. One evening before the evening at the command post of our regiment appeared a skinny, dressed, combed under the Führer German pilot, accompanied by an infantry escort armed with a rifle. Seeing the officer aviator coming out of the dugout, the escort, in a rapid-fire voice, blurted out, "Comrade Major, take this Krolt against receipt. You're one humpback sorry your attack aircraft so junkers smacked that he immediately flamed up with a candle. Only this one." The escort nodded at the officer, managed to jump out with a parachute. So we caught him with the sergeant. Our commander told us to bring him to you, but he says to take a receipt that you've handed him over to safe hands. So you please take this murderer. The German raised his head and said arrogantly, "I am an officer. I'll be demanding," and hastily unbuttoning his leather jacket, under which the crosses gleamed, began to pull out of his breast pocket some document. "We will demand it." Major Streltsov interrupted the Hitlerite, and in the meantime, let's talk about something. "I will not say anything," hysterically blurted out the prisoner. "I'm a Soldat. I swore an oath to mein Führer." "Well, you don't have to say anything. Only it will be taken into account. Sentry. Called Streltsov to a soldier. Take the prisoner to the Guba for now." "You are the Guba?" Hitlerite's eyes widened, confusedly ran. "I don't want Guba. International Convention." You remembered about the convention you hide. Dmitry Zhabinsky, who came to the control room, couldn't resist, and throwing bombs at an ambulance train, And shooting the wounded, didn't you think about the convention then? Dmitri blushed, his eyes poured blood, his fists clenched. Calm down, he'll talk differently now, whispered to Dmitri Streltsov. Hauptmann realized that he had lost, and lowered his head. I'll sprechen. What do you have to say? I have a little kinder in Vaterland, as if to justify the Hauptmann. Major Streltsov wrinkled his nose. Many of us also had children. The prisoner, treading carefully, went down into the dugout. An hour later, the operatives checked the Hitlerite's testimony with intelligence data. Almost everything matched. And early the next morning, 2 groups of Ilyushin, led by me and Jabinski, went to attack the enemy airfield. The cars in the parking lots went up in flames. Cisterns spewed flames. Not a single Nazi airplane could not get into the air. A good fireworks turned out. Soon there was a lull. Exhausted by continuous battles, the flying staff rested, at the same time preparing for new battles. I was walking along the quiet airfield, and it was as if I was seeing it for the first time. In front of me, an ordinary field. On one side a forest, on the other a village. The intoxicating spirit of grass, the sound of grasshoppers, birds singing overhead, thin-stemmed beautiful birch trees, pensively stopped at the edge of the ravine, swaying their branches, and unusual silence. I choose a secluded place and stretch out on the grass. How great it is to detach myself from worries and anxieties, to lie down with half an hour, giving rest to the tired body. I want to distract myself, but I can't. I look up into the sky and I see fighting. And there is no silence, engines are humming, roaring, machine gun bursts are pounding. My soul hurts, not everyone is destined to survive. Here is Kolya. One more wonderful guy is gone. Tolia, you've got a letter from Izium. I turn around, Katusha is in front of me. She sits down and holds out a triangle. Thank you. I read it and feel Katusha's eyes on me. And you've lost weight, you're looking gaunt, she sighed. Tired? Not so much tired as exhausted. Katya lightly ran her fingers over my scars. Do they hurt? No, only it's awkward to shave. You know, I made a wish, if I see a stork, my happiness will come true, Katya said, squinting from the sun. I smiled. If it's not a secret, tell me, what is it? What secrets do I have from you? Katya frowned. I want this cursed war to end sooner. I want us to defeat the Nazis sooner. That's what I want too. And then we'll go to the Volga. Have you ever been to the Volga? The girl became animated. I shook my head. No. It's wide, full of water. Katusha spoke as if she were reciting. Her face is spiritualized, her eyes shining. And how beautiful she is. No, it's impossible to tell you about it, you have to see it. You have to see her, I repeat mentally. What if she gets hit? And Katusha will go to the Volga alone, without me. What are you thinking about now? Katya always filled the pause with this question. Our boys are always in front of my eyes. Kyriev. Are you saying it could happen to you too? You mustn't think like that, you hear me, you mustn't. It won't happen to you. I know that very well. Katusha gently kissed the already healed scars on my face. I looked at the map today, soon we'll be at the border. Soon the war will be over. Then we'll be able to talk about the wedding, I said in her tone. Talking cheerfully, we walked through the quiet airfield. The setting sun played on the windows of the cockpits of attack aircraft. The forest rumbled, smelled of fading leaves. Autumn was approaching.